Well, this year has been a really exciting year. We are only in March, and there has been lots and lots of talk and volatility in the market. First of all, even before Trump became president, there was a lot of talk about tariffs. And then the tariffs came, and then they got postponed. And then tariffs came again in March 2nd, and then they got delayed. And now we have lots of talk about tariffs and what it does to the economy and how it will affect the Canadian economy. So definitely lots of volatility. And over the last 2 days, we have seen in the market just drop because of all these anticipation and the investors having a hard time understanding what is going on. So why do these tariffs and the market have anything to do with us? Well, it's because either we are saving for a future or we are investing for a future. Either way, we are invested into the market, whether you want it or not. If you have a TFSA, if you have an RSP, if you bought ETFs, if you bought an index, or even if you bought a mutual fund, all these will be impacted by the volatility of the market. And so far, no one has been able to influence the market like Trump. This is really historic because events come and go and have influenced the market, but not one person has ever done what Trump is currently doing. And so to really understand how this volatility plays out and what it means for me, the regular Joe physician, I'm busy all day, working in the hospital, working in my clinic, operating on hearts and brains and other things. I don't keep up. So how do I know what to do next? Or should I be doing something next? We're going to be discussing with a portfolio manager and understand what are the steps that we need to take moving forward, because this will be a bumpy ride for the next 4 years. So I hope that you enjoy this podcast and sort of take out the golden nuggets of the messages and just try to think about what is it that I need to do, or more importantly, what is it that I do not do or should not do over the next 4 years to protect myself, but also to win within this volatility. So here is the podcast. I hope you enjoy.
How's my financial health, Doc? Welcome to the Financial Literacy Podcast for Healthcare Professionals, where financial security and wealth topics are not a taboo.
So good morning, people. Good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome back to the How is My Financial Health Doc podcast. And I am your host, Vu Kiet Tran. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Jonathan Lin. As you can see in the background, Jonathan is from BMO Nesbitt Burns. I'm just going to say that for now because I'm going to let Jonathan introduce himself. Jonathan, as you can see, those of you who are looking at this on YouTube, he is the Chow Yun Fat of BMO. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much, all the listeners from Canada, Ontario, and around the world.
Very nice, very nice, Jonathan. I do not do a very good introduction of you because you're more than just Chow Yun Fat of the BMO. So, tell us a little bit who you are, what do you do, and let's start with that.
Okay. Professionally, again, my name is Jonathan Lin. I'm part of BMO Nesbitt Burns, which is the wealth arm of Bank of Montreal, the brokerage arm. And what I do is essentially, in a nutshell, help clients achieve their goals and their dreams as best as I can. How I do that is essentially use our resources, my network, my knowledge, my certifications to help plan and optimize a client's financial health. Yes, 92% of my clients are physicians or some sort of medical field, but business owners, retirees, and many other people who seek our advice and guidance to ensure that they are either meeting the goals or at least or surpassing in some cases, or at least getting them to as close as they can. And we touch upon topics such as philanthropic giving, which is over the last 2 years a big topic, estate planning, financial planning, tax planning, obviously portfolio management and creating portfolios to meet with the current climate and future climate. Um, as mentioned, financial planning, insurance strategies, cascading wealth to the next generation, looking at other strategies that some people may not have considered, such as IPPs and PPPs, individual pension plans and personal pension plans. And even now, as the world of alternative investing, which largely not focuses, but the four main buckets are real estate, equities, infrastructure, and debt, have really grown, especially in our Canadian space, as investors are becoming more and more comfortable with the strategy. So we hit upon many, many different topics, as you can see, and we take a very holistic approach, again, to help clients and their families and their beneficiaries and the causes that they are near, are that they feel important to them and are near and dear to their heart, to make sure that they are achieved.
Thank you very much. You know what? That is a very comprehensive description of what you do. And I'm glad you did that because we're going to be sort of today leaning on your expertise and your knowledge. Now, I don't know if you brought your crystal ball to work today. Okay. I
No,
certainly
I
do not
forgot
have
it
my
at
crystal
home.
ball, but hopefully you have some, at least some tea leaves that we can look at.
Okay.
So what we're talking about today is you talked about, current climate and future climate. And what is more timely than this whole tariff thing right now? And so we're March 6th today, and the tariff kicked in March 2nd. Is that correct? March 2nd or March 4th?
March 4th on
March
Tuesday.
on Tuesday, March
Well,
4th.
actually, they kicked in early February, but then we got the
Delay.
reprieve, the 30-day
Correct.
delay, and then on Tuesday was the official day that things kicked in.
Correct. Correct. So we're talking today because we're in day two of the implementation, or at least the enforce of the tariff. And you know what? For physicians like myself, for many healthcare professionals, we have assets in the market. We've been invested. We have TFSAs, we have RSPs, we have non-reg account. Some of us even have pensions, and we're obviously invested in the market. And we're trying to make sense of all this. Like, you know what? This is not my day job, right? My day job is I'm an emergency physician. So for me to try to understand this becomes a bit complicated. This is why I've kind of asked you to say, hey, Jonathan, can you come on my show and sort of give us some understanding? I hope we can do that today.
And I also want to reassure you that yes, it's a complicated environment for individuals like yourself, but it's also a very complicated environment for individuals like ourselves who have the experience, who have gone through multiple cycles, who have the many resources and analytics at our disposal. I was just with our head bond trader about 30 minutes before our podcast. Unfortunately, he can't make it because he's got to go back to the office to clear out his trades and clear his blotter and all these things. But it's if it's difficult for us, I can sincerely appreciate that it'll be difficult for individuals like yourself who have expertise in other fields, which is totally acceptable and understandable.
Okay, well, thank you for understanding. And so if I ask you dumb questions, please be gentle with me.
What do they say? The old adage, no question is a dumb question.
Okay, here we go. So, give us a sense of What are the tariffs and why are they here? What's going on? What's happening right now between us and the US? And what are the purposes of these tariffs?
I mean, on a general sense, is basically a tax on all the exports of a particular country in a very general, broad sense in
Yeah,
terms of the definition. So what's happening right now is President Trump is imposing a tariff for all the exports from Canada and imports into the US. Similarly, on the southern border, the southern US border, make that clear, not southern Canadian border, but on the southern US border, they are also imposing tariffs and essentially a tax of Mexican uh, products that are being exported into Mexico and imported into Canada. I mean, into the US.
correct.
So that's the general sense of what tariffs are.
And what does that do in then? So we are exporting, we as Canada are exporting, let's just say, I'll pick an example, okay? Let's call wheat. We export wheat to the US, and then
Yes.
there's a tax on that wheat. So let's call it $100. Now there's a 25% tax on it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's now $125. So the company who's buying that wheat not is not only paying $100, is now paying $125. So what are the implications of that for us and the implications of that for them?
Okay. The implications for, as you meant, first addressed, for us as Canadians, is that it makes our product or service or whatnot, but in the case of wheat, our product more expensive to the Americans because they have to now pay that extra 25% tax. So, which means that from a behavioral aspect, or what it's supposed to drive solutions to, is that then the US purchaser will then find alternatives to buy within the US in order to avoid that extra 25% taxation.
Got it. So
So it's higher prices for the US, but it also means that it's arguably lower exports for us as Canadians because the US are disincentivized to buy from either Canada or the US.
correct.
I mean, sorry,
So
from Mexico.
Mexico. So what that does is it's drive behavior for the Americans to buy within America. That's what
That's correct.
this
This
is
is the
about.
whole America First mantra.
Which makes sense. Which makes sense if I'm Trump, that makes sense, right? Where it no longer makes sense is now it makes things more expensive even for Americans unless they have a lot of wheat to sell as well.
That's
If
correct.
if they
Not
don't
just
have a lot
wheat.
of wheat, it just increases their price and they cannot find alternatives.
The funny thing is, I'll use that wheat as an example because I was
Yeah.
reading an article yesterday. So some of the border cities, and they were focusing on Buffalo, for example, which is very close to Toronto for those across the country and across the world who don't know. I mean, it's a 2 hour drive from Toronto,
Yeah.
Ontario. However, they were featuring a small microbrewery that was, not only do they import the aluminum to can their beer, but also they buy Canadian wheat to brew their beer. And they were featuring the owner of this particular microbrewery. And he was saying, yes, it's difficult because I can't even find the wheat in the
In the
US
US.
to brew my beer. And I can't can my beer because I'm buying the aluminum from Canada. So there is a huge effect on that. And you're right, Vu, in terms of the extra costs that this microbrewery and many other small to medium sized businesses rely on their respective trading partners. Mexico also plays a very important role to ensure that their prices are reasonable and that they obviously will try to pass on as much as the extra cost as they can to consumers. no pun intended. However, there's only so much, and there's a breaking point where they cannot absorb, the consumer cannot absorb as much, and the manufacturer cannot absorb as much, which then puts a strain on consumerism, business sentiment, even unemployment.
Right. So what that means is on the Canadian side, we will be selling less, so we'll have an economic downturn. On the US side, they will pay more, which may end up in an economic downturn as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, tariffs from economics 102 is bad.
Right. I remember Reagan saying that. I was a little lad and I remember Reagan saying that. So
No, you
now
were just a tear in your father's eye.
I was
Not
just
even a little lad.
a little lad. Let's talk about the implications. So what does it mean for you and the markets? Because you play in the market, you analyze the market, you understand the market. So we are seeing a whole bunch of things. On Tuesday, we saw the market drop. And on Wednesday, we saw the market go up a little bit, but still not back. And so what does this currently mean for you, for us, and people who are invested in the stock market? What are we seeing currently? And then we'll talk a little bit about what we think about the future, but currently, what are we seeing?
We're seeing a lot of uncertainty, and the only certainty is uncertainty. We cannot time the market. It's very difficult to invest based on tariff news. We, as portfolio managers, wealth advisors, and financial planners, we invest money for generations. Literally, I have a family that's 4 generations. And what it currently means, actually, nobody knows. And if somebody does know, they're lying to you. What it means is that there is increased volatility, but sometimes increased volatility means opportunity. However, if we really take a look at first ensuring that your portfolio is proper, I cannot see every single person's portfolio across the world. So I cannot speak to how people are invested, whether they're too overly invested in crypto or gold or oil or many other things. There's 6,000 investing companies in the US and 3,000 in Canada, plus another countless in the world. So I can't speak to everybody's portfolio. However, what we're seeing is some volatility, and depending on how you're structured and what your goals are, will then dictate what needs to be done from a short, medium, and long-term perspective.
Got it. So lots of volatility, a bit of a rocky market over the next at least few weeks, maybe months.
Yeah,
Let's
we're
look.
only really halfway through this. I
Oh
mean, like
God.
March 4th, right,
Yeah,
was only a little bit of the of what's going on. Then there's some more things coming on April 2nd.
correct.
But as of 3:30 today, we got an announcement that in Canada, we call it CUSMA, the Canadian US Mexico agreement. And
Yeah,
then in the US, they call it the USMCA.
yeah.
But now, as of 3:30, there's a reprieve until April 2nd in
Or
terms
automotive.
of not only automotive, but
Oh,
everything that's CUSMA or USMCA related has a reprieve
oh,
until April 2nd. Automotive was this morning. USMCA and CUSMA at 3:30 this afternoon. So it's very, very hard to answer your question, Boo. How do we plan for this in the short term? And when you said this could be a few months or a few weeks or a few months, it would really depend on the effects on the respective economies, most importantly in the US, to determine how long this will last for. And this is unlike 2008, 2009, where there was a systemic issue. It's unlike a pandemic. It's unlike the fastest interest rate rise in 2022. Like, this is a very different environment that we are facing. And this is a policy decision making volatility as opposed to a very structural or systemic issue. So
Right.
it's very different.
Right. This one is man-made.
Well, 08, 09 was also man-made with all the bad
Right,
loans.
but this is one man.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
Right.
Absolutely agreed.
So let's look a little bit into the future. And again, I presume you left your crystal ball at home. But let's project a little bit over the next 4 years, not too much in the future, because we got 4 years of this administration.
Potentially more.
Oh my
He
God.
told the Americans, "You never need to vote again."
Oh my God, there's gonna be a civil war. I guarantee you that.
Okay.
So let's just project a little bit over the next 4 years. What can we anticipate? I think we can anticipate that there's going to be uncertainty, right? That I think is this administration. Anything else we can anticipate?
I know the media and a lot of other analysts focus on the bad, and I recognize and appreciate that there is going to be a lot of pain, whether it's from small to medium businesses, whether it's automotive, large companies. There is going to be a period of adjustment. But what I actually think should be also focused on as a devil's advocate is that in 4 years from now, I think the Canadian economy would actually be better despite the short-term pain or even medium pain into 2026. And the US would also do better. I think bringing back industry, manufacturing, building stuff actually brings prosperity to the respective countries that do that. So I think in 4 years from now, looking at both our countries would actually be a better thing. I
You know
know people
what?
are very emotional about this. I get it. There's a lot of anger and all those things. But if you tell me 4 years from now, I think even the ministers removing the interprovincial barriers, right? With the tariffs, the general math is that it's going to reduce our GDP, our gross domestic product, by about 4%. However, if we just remove our interprovincial trade barriers, that will increase our GDP by 4%.
Oh, nice.
So it's actually a net neutral impact if we were to work with each other. And also by reducing our reliance on the US, as we can see now, we were very, very tied at the hip. If we continue to now expand our trading partnerships, they're building now really accelerating the pipelines of liquid natural gas so that we have contracts with Asia. We can start exporting our things to Europe, which is rearming itself, right? 800, they're even doing adjustments, right? To reduce their military reliance on the US to protect Europe and NATO and all those things. And then they just pledged $800 billion in terms of their infrastructure, military spend, all those things. I think this is in 4 years, I think we'll come out better for this.
I 120% agree with you, actually. I'm very happy that you brought up this very optimistic view because I share it as well. The fact that the different ministers are talking about breaking down interprovincial barriers. And I never understood why we cannot buy electricity from Quebec or why is it so difficult to buy wine from BC? Like I
Yes.
couldn't even understand why we make it so difficult for each other as Canadians, right?
Mhm.
And so breaking that down will just foster better economies within Canada. And like you said, we're now looking beyond our nose. We're now saying, oh, well, other than the US, who else can we do business with, right?
Absolutely.
I remember in the past we used to have, teams of people going to China, going to India, and going to other countries to foster collaboration in business. this simply just expedited that and fast tracked that even more. And so I think that is very, very good. And breaking down into provincial barriers is the first thing to do. And like you say, bringing back manufacturing, bringing back a lot of different economies so that, we're self-sustaining, I think is a good thing. So out of this journey, out of this event, a lot of good things will happen. I call this in some lingo and in some industries, we call this creative destruction, right? You need to destroy something to have new creation coming out. And I think this is the creative destruction that we're seeing, that we are going to see.
In my terms, I think and I totally agree with you. I look at it as a mentality of complacency to now competitiveness.
Oh, yeah.
And through this, we're going to have to create and change our tax and regulatory environment that actually attracts capital rather than chase it away. Also, smarter trade strategies that reduce our over reliance on the US, which, as mentioned, the interprovincial trade barriers, as well as using your words, looking beyond our nose to then be a more global trading partner, as, as well as a renewed commitment to nation building, housing, infrastructure, fostering and attracting talent. I was just at with my head bond trader, Richard. He's originally from Quebec. And the Quebec mentality in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and still a little bit today, we're very separatists. And he was and still maintains a lot of French friends and family. And even last week, when he was there for a conference, he just told me he's never seen as much nationalism from the Quebecois, saying, okay, we're on a very national tone now. It's actually pulling our nation together and better in order to be a stronger nation and again, from complacency to competitiveness.
I would have liked to see this national patriotism come up spontaneously, but it didn't, and it took an event like this to do it. But I'm still happy for it. So I'm very happy that as a nation we've come up to stand together. That for sure is a good thing that happened.
Absolutely. There's a big mining conference actually here in downtown Toronto. It's called PDAC, where all the junior miners, all the big miners come together for a 3-day conference. And one of their, I guess, social gatherings, I saw one of my commercial bankers yesterday, and he had a Canadian flag lapel pin on there. I was like, hey, that looks really cool. Where'd you get that? And he said he was at this social gathering in the evening, and everybody was taking them. Like they almost they did run out actually of these pins. You could just really feel that everybody's pulling together and really trying to, vote with their grocery shopping, even, right? Buy Canadian. Like they say, there's a saying about, buying Canadian and buy US. Right?
Well, listen, so this is all good. I think the future for Canada, for the economy, I think the future for the entire world will be very good, including for the US. I think
Mhm.
I think this is has solidified people's in their minds how they become complacent over time and now becoming more competitive. So now let's just talk about, what is it that a regular Joe like me do? Like, there's so much uncertainty, there's so much volatility, and hey, I've got my day job. I'm not sitting in front of a computer watching things go up and down and watching every single newscast coming out. So what am I a regular Joe to do? What are some of the recommendations you would have for someone like myself?
I guess selfishly making sure that you work with a professional. like you said, you have a day job, you're busy, you're in the ER, you're also a long-term care doctor. I know your day, right? Like you barely get any sleep. And you're doing this very altruistic and sometimes thankless job by inviting experts like myself and putting on seminars and conferences to help educate your fellow physicians. So I first thank you and applaud you for doing that. So by working with an advisor, or sometimes you can do it yourself. I get it. Some people just WebMD their symptoms or whatnot. So if that's from a medical standpoint, by making sure your short, medium, and long-term goals are already defined. Like I have a client that knew prior to this he was going to send his daughter to Ireland for dental school, and he said, "Hey, I have to pay her tuition in September. I put aside this money and I need it for some temper. So I put it into short-term, liquid, accessible money that I knew that's going to come out and this happened in January, prior to all this volatility. So for me and for him, he's like, okay, I have that X amount of money, and as you may or may not know, foreign dental or medical schools are very expensive. So I don't have he doesn't have to worry about that. All right. I have another client whose daughter is going to aviation school. It's $500 an hour for flight practice, almost 6 grand a month. It goes to go 3 to 4 times a week. So I've already locked that money in. So from a short-term perspective, that's already safe. From a medium-term perspective, it really depends on what the usage is, how much it is, their penchant or preference towards either risk or safety. So then we design portfolios of that. And then from the longer term perspective, just making sure that you have, again, a diversified portfolio, you're earning consistent income, which you are doing as a physician, saving on a regular basis, and making sure that you have enough money for retirement. So always taking that longer term perspective, I think, is important if those pieces are your goals. Again, as I mentioned, the pandemic, credit crisis of '08, 2022 with the rise in interest rates, those things they're out of your control. So again, just focus on what you can control and work with a good advisor to make sure that you keep your emotions in check, not time the market, and making sure that you have quality businesses that will be around longer than Trump.
Thank you for that. I think there's a few things I would like to unpack. One, understanding your short, medium, and long-term goals. You know what? Before learning about personal finance, I had no idea what that was. I was living day to day. I went to work, I made some money, I spent it, that was it, right? But now I understand what you mean when you say have short-term, medium-term, long-term goal. And the important thing is for everybody to recognize that. But if you don't recognize that, you should and work with someone who can help you with that and plan those short-term, medium, and long-term goals. So at least know what they are, plan for them. Number two, you said something that is amazing, and I say it all the time. You can't control what you can't control, so try to control what you can control. And so you can't control the market, you can't control the climate, you can't control the weather. So control what you can, which is your emotions, how you spend, how you save, how you define your short-term, medium-term, long-term goal. And last one, you said, you know what? And if this is something that I've learned in many books and many people have told me is don't try to time the market. Right? Don't try to time the market. And we tend to do that because it's exciting, right? The
Emotions.
market dropped by 2%. It's time to go in, and then tomorrow drops even more. I'm like, oh my God, right? And you think you're at the top of the market, you buy in and tomorrow drop. So you know what? We don't have that expertise. So don't try to time the market. Spend time in the market, but
In
don't don't try to time it. And lastly, I think you said it. It's just work with professional people. And if you can do it alone, then that's great. I tend to not operate on my own appendix, so I don't. but many people can. Many people have those expertise and know how to invest and understand investing. So those people, all the power to them. But for most of us, I think we do need a little bit of help. And more than help, I think we need guidance because this is going to be uncertain times for a long, long time, at least 4 years, and hopefully not beyond 4 years, because if it's beyond 4 years, we will have civil unrest for sure.
And if I could add to that, ooh, those are very, very great points. From the outset of my introduction and taking a holistic standpoint, it's not just short, medium, long-term goals in your portfolio, but I also look at estate strategies, protecting risk and mitigating risk, protecting your income so that when the markets do gyrate, and they do, no doubt about it, every market does. And prior to 2022, I was talking to investors. We were like, oh, the real estate market goes up and up and up. Can you guarantee me 10% a year? Because look at my properties, look at all. And now we see the reckoning where 50% of those condos downtown Toronto here are empty. Like some even freestanding properties have dropped 20 to 25%. So nothing goes up in a straight line and doesn't stay up forever. Again, looking at the holistic picture where we start off with a proper financial plan, that is the foundation of everything. Because from that plan, I can identify your burn rate, which means how much you want to spend. And then I can see all the different pieces of income, inheritances, when you want to retire, taxation, and map out your whole life to see where those opportunities are. And if you have a philanthropic or charitable bone, I can implement strategies that, hey, you can still give to the synagogue, the temple, the church, the Ride for Cancer, hospitals, and whatnot. And so there are other strategies where we can implement that. Sometimes the markets will do what they do, but sometimes I can put in real strategies, for example, tax strategies, where it's like an immediate 25% savings guaranteed. Like, so it takes a very holistic picture. I get that we're talking about tariffs and the impact on economies and your portfolios. But I want to stress that that's one piece and one bucket that is very, very important, along with the other complementary buckets that need to be addressed.
I appreciate you just said that. I really do. For me, investing is a small part. And I don't say that because I don't do investing. I do, of course. But I say that because as a professional, whether I'm a physician, dentist, nurse practitioner, lawyer, accountant, the problem is not making enough money. The problem is keeping enough of it. And so a lot of the issues that professionals face is actually not accumulation, but a taxation issue, an estate issue,
Mm-hmm.
risk mitigation issue. So investing is one part of it, but I believe that the other part are, if not more important, but just as important. And you've mentioned many of them, including estate planning. So thank you very much for being holistic and thinking about and talking about all that.
Yes, because portfolio management, if somebody's like, hey, I bought Nvidia at $100, or this and that, like, it's more of a commodity, I guess. But the holistic piece, I think, is the most important, well, not the, but a very equal importance of that. And it truly is, after doing this for 19 years, very, very rarely are my conversations about portfolios. Yes, rates of returns. Yes, what's in it in a general high level sense. But I find that most people are more interested in what that money can do for them in other aspects and of their life, achieve the goals that they want to achieve. by using all these other strategies as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe in that as well. So, Jonathan, we're going to wrap up here because we've had a long discussion already. But before we go,
Really? I thought
um,
so short.
I was,
I can talk with you all day.
oh, you can. Well, I don't know. The listeners want to hear me talk all day. That
Okay,
for
okay.
sure. They need a break from time to time.
All right. We'll schedule another a topic as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. If you want to come back, I would definitely have you back.
I would be honored, sir.
So, before we leave, one thing that's burning on your chest, you must tell my audience before we go today. What would that be?
Work with a trusted advisor because we will prove our worth and our wealth. I mean, our worth and our value well beyond what you think as an expense. Convert that mentality in as an investment. There's a famous dynamic commercial, God bless them. They said, your most valuable asset, and I quoted dynamic, but your most investment or your most important asset in your portfolio might be your advisor.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you for being on the show and helping us understand the tariffs, but also more importantly, the impact. But what I really, really enjoyed is your thought about the future, and the future is bright. I should put my sunglasses on now.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's been an honor. I really appreciate you. And I hope this was valuable to you and your audience, most importantly. And I welcome the opportunity to come back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
So, for sure, these are tumultuous times. Uncertainty, unstableness, and lots of volatility. But a lot of the message that came through are actually important. And so make sure that despite the volatility and the uncertainty, that you do the basic steps for your own personal finance and your own personal security. Regardless of how the market does tomorrow or in 4 years, there are some things that need to be done from a fundamental perspective. And I think Jonathan pointed them out really well. So thank you very much for listening this far. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends, with your colleagues, with your families, and your pets, especially if they're pet turtles. I used to have pet turtles and really loved them. So please share it around. If you have any comments or have any feedback, please email me at hmfhd2020@gmail.com. I look forward to reading your comments and feedback. And also, if you have any suggestions for future episodes, please let me know. I'm looking forward to engaging with you next time.
How is My Financial Health Doc? Podcast is hosted by Dr. Vukit Tran. Dr. Tran is a physician with a special interest in personal financial security and wealth education. Dr. Tran does not render or offer to render personalized investment or tax advice through this financial podcast. The information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, investment, or legal advice. Please confer with your advisor, lawyer, or accountant for specific advice.